wanted to go through some of these questions from the Edulastic assignment recently since a lot of people had some trouble. Now, when you looked at this question here, first thing you want to do is look at the title. So here it says U.S. oil exports. So remembering what that would mean. And you have a list of different countries. And the two different colored bars tell you that one was in the year 2011 in March, the other one was in 2012 in March. And this shows you country by country the amount of U.S. oil exports. So when we're talking about U.S. oil exports, that means how much we are selling to these other countries in those time frames. So you want to just first take a minute and look at each graph, understand what it means before you try to move on. So the question says, which of the following conclusions can be made using the information on the graph? Well, only one of these is going to be right, so you just go through these one at a time and see which one is correct. The first one says the U.S. sent more wheat to the Netherlands than any other country. Well, if you were looking at this, not really paying attention to the question, then you might have thought, okay, well, Netherlands is the highest, but notice that it says wheat, and there's nothing on here about wheat. Letter B, the U.S. imports more oil than it exports. Well, it says the U.S. imports more than it exports. There's nothing on here about imports. There's only things here about exports. So that's a distractor. C, the total price of the oil that the U.S. exported to Peru increased between 2011 and 2012. It says the total price of the oil that the U.S. exported. Now, price of oil that they exported from Peru. Now, the amount of oil went up from Peru from 11 to 12, and so that looks true. Letter D, the Netherlands and Mexico likely will trade with each other. This doesn't tell us anything about why Netherlands or Mexico would trade. So the best answer here should be the one about Peru. Once again, you want to just look very carefully at what this table is about. Start with the title. Acres of forest versus population. In other words, the amount of forest that's in a country. Here's their population. And then we also have they divide that out to get acres of forest per person. And we see these three countries that are being used. Given the information, which country is most likely to need to import lumber? Now, you need to remember what import means. Import means that you're going to be buying lumber. And what would be a reason why you'd want to buy lumber? That would be because you are lower on it than other countries. So here, the distractor would be, do I want to look at the amount of forest that they have versus the amount of acres per person? Well, the acres per person would be the best way to compare because that tells you how much forest they have per person. And in either case, they're both the same. Mexico has the lowest amount of forest, and they also have the lowest amount of acres per person. So because they are the lowest in acres of forest and acres per person, they would be the one who is in most need of lumber, which would be coming from the forest. This chart here is comparing oil reserves to, which is like the amount of oil, population, and the oil or the barrels per person. So this is showing how much oil, what's the population, and if you break it down, how much oil per person if you divide that out. The one distractor item that you really need to pay careful attention to on this one, which is kind of annoying, but it's just the way that they wrote it, to mess with you, is that Romania and Japan are in millions. United States and Venezuela are in billions. So if you don't pay careful attention to that, you probably would have gotten that question wrong. But it says, which country has the most oil available to export? But when you can tell the difference between billion and million, this question should be pretty easy if you just pay careful attention. Here we have a question about drawing a conclusion from the data. We have the number of internet users compared to their population. Which conclusion can be drawn? Well, so let's just go through these one by one and see which one makes the most sense. Letter A, Chinese citizens likely have more access to technology. A lot of people think that because it says the number of internet users, they have 389 million internet users. So in terms of the number of internet users, they have the most. But if you look at all of these three columns, then that will give you some different information. So China, yes, they have the most number of internet users, but they also have by far the most population. Well, at least more than Japan and Egypt. And it says this would be the best column to look at because it says percent of population that uses the internet. Well, China's only got 30% of their population using the internet. So when it says Chinese citizens have more access to technology, if only 30% use the internet, that's not true. B, a high-tech company is most likely to be located in Japan. Well, Japan has 99 million internet users, which would be 78% of their population. That's by far the highest. Egyptian cities likely have the highest level of education. This chart doesn't tell you much about education. And even if you were going to say, well, internet helps with education, only 24% have the internet. Letter D, access to the internet is provided by the government in India. This chart does not say anything about government providing internet. And if they did, it probably would be a lot higher than 5% anyway. So that one you wouldn't be able to tell either.